right, now what you might want to do is, let me just spotlight myself. Spotlight for everyone. Okay, there we go. All right, good morning everybody, and welcome to today's session on maximizing revenue and profitability in an uncertain economy. And we'll explore the essential strategies to enhance your sales performance and make more money regardless of what the economy really does, because as Carl will point out, uncertain economies are actually very good places to be, because a lot of organizations actually do make a lot of money. So today, overview over the next 60 minutes, I'm going to cover the major shifts we see in selling, what you need to master to become more effective, and how we could obviously help you accelerate your progress and sales results should you choose to work with us. A little bit of housekeeping. If you're not speaking, could you please just put yourself on mute? And if you have questions or comments, if you could use the chat, that would be wonderful. Now, a little bit of background for those of you who don't know me and for the tape. I have a background in IT and engineering. I spent 20 years in IT working for major vendors, mainly American multinationals, both from the technical side, the sales side, as well as senior management. And for the last 23 years, Barbara and I have run a practice, Revealed Resources, where we work with business owners and sales teams to help them improve performance, and with business owners to help them move their business from, dare I say it, sometimes chaotic businesses to being a business which would ostensibly run without them, giving them choices whether they stay in the business doing the parts that they love, whether they want to have someone else run it entirely independently, or be in a position to sell. And I always stress that the business needs to be in a position to sell. If you're running a real business, which means that you have employees, if you have leverage, because you just don't know what might happen. I'm just talking to somebody just now where business partner is his wife, got very serious cancer. He now has to look at how he's going to run this 30-40 person business without her and put in place. Now, that's why I say that you always need to have these things in place long before you need them. Over the years, we've learned some harsh lessons, as you can imagine. And one of the biggest lessons we've learned was that you have to have a marketing, prospecting, and selling system in place. You've got to have strategies to bring in clients, to engage and convert them and keep them on a long-term basis. So if I look at some of the issues that people are talking about now, and I talk to a lot of different business owners, cash flow tends to be a bit lumpy. There's sort of feast and famine. There is a lot of competition in the market. None of us do. Everything we do has, every one of us has competitors. We all have competitors. If we didn't have competitors, I would actually suggest there's no market. And because there are so many competitors out there, and there is so much noise coming from say, social media and all of the other things that bombard us every day, there is difficulty getting attention, and it's very difficult to stand out from that crowd. Now, and also because there is so much competition, it becomes somewhat a price-driven market, because unless you can differentiate yourself and say, what is your specific value? How do you add tangible and intangible value to your clients? Why would they buy from you if they were in the market to buy something over everybody else out there? And the other thing that we see a lot of at the moment is people are simply not committing. I think the media has a lot to blame for this, where we talk about interest rates, we talk about doom and gloom, and therefore people are very hesitant to put their hands in their pockets and actually spend money, which leads to longer sales cycles. It leads to hesitation to commit. People just don't make decisions, and a lot of people, interestingly, just ghost you without saying anything, which is really annoying in a way. At least make a decision. Tell me that you're not going to do something rather than string me along, is my attitude. Now, what's also really interesting, and Carl would back this up, is very many very successful businesses have started in recessions. I'm using an HP laptop. HP was actually started in a major recession back in the 50s or 60s, whatever it was. Okay, but just more recently, Microsoft started in the recession in 1975. Airbnb, Slack, WhatsApp, Uber, they all started in recessions, GFC, last 20 years. So there's no excuse for any of us to turn around and say that, oh, woe is me, business is bad. It's up to us to be able to go out there and actually get the business by positioning ourselves correctly as the go-to vendor in our particular space. So when I talk to all of us as business owners and sales leaders, I say, okay, so what is it that we really want? We all want a steady influx of leads. We want profitable clients, and we want long-term business and referrals. And something that I really stress with everybody is the lifetime value of a client, because a lot of people look at business as a transaction. You know, people come in once and they go, and then you have to get somebody else and they go, and you have to get somebody else and they go. Whereas the real money is made and the profitability is made in the lifetime value, getting people to come back time and time again and cross-selling and upselling for the life of their client. You know, we've had clients with us 10 years, 12 years, just because they value what we do for them, and it is a no-brainer for them to stay with us. And if you have your client acquisition system dialed in on an emotional level, you'll have the confidence that you're going to meet your sales numbers, which is profitability, but it means on an emotional level, less stress, you have a better lifestyle, more well-being, dare I say it, a happier life. So today I want to cover a number of different things. And the first one is essentially conviction. Because if you don't believe in your own product or service, whatever it is, and you don't have 110% conviction that what you're doing is going to add value for the right person, why would you be in this business? Why would you be selling what you're selling? Because that's not doing anybody any favors. And so to do that, we're going to look at our Triple E method, where we look at your expertise, your experience, and your essence to define your uniqueness. And then we're going to look at how to marry the problems your clients really want to solve with the market that you're actually going to go for and the outcomes that they really want. And then how you actually segment your market, because not everybody in your market is equal. And we'll outline our system for attracting the right people, engaging them, and selling them, as well as how you, at a high level, have sales conversations. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at your unique selling proposition determined by, let me just move this out of the way, determined by your Triple E framework. Now, if we look at the Triple E framework, there are three components to this. Every one of us has expertise in a particular area, and we have experience. And it's that combination of expertise and experience that in the middle, where I've got conviction, that gives you the conviction that you actually know what you're doing and you can solve specific problems for a market. But what makes us unique, because a lot of people have very similar expertise as you, and a lot of people will have very similar experience as you. What is your essence as a human being? What is your essence as an organization? What are your values and beliefs as an organization? What do you do that other people won't do? Will you go the extra mile for people? What is it that you actually produce, and how do you actually go about it? And if you look at the intersections between your expertise and your essence, gives you a level of connection with your audience. Because the reason for picking a particular industry or industries that you have a lot of experience in means that the industry that you're talking to, the people in your industry, and remember, we're always selling to people, the people in your industry will go, you understand me, you understand my industry. Because like it or not, we all have this sort of belief that our business is different, our industry is different. And if you don't understand our particular industry, well, you have no hope of actually dealing with us. And honestly, that's a load of bunkum, because, you know, while industries have nuances, obviously, business is business is business, and sales is sales. And and psychology is psychology, and understanding people, and people have not changed over millennia. So it comes down to how you use your expertise, your experience, and who you are to have compassion as to what the problems are and the outcomes are that your particular industries are looking for. And if we use that as a combination, that is what makes you unique and differentiates yourself from everybody else out there. So, given this, this is our fundamental way of going to the market, and we call it the demand triangle. And it encapsulates everything that we do as a framework before we go and actually start to sell. So if we look at the left, we've got, turn this thing on, we've got the message. And the message is really critical because the message comes from pinpointing your specific problems that your potential clients are facing and the outcomes that they are looking to achieve. And people buy things to solve problems and to achieve outcomes and aspirations. But the interesting thing is we are all far more motivated to taking action if there is some sort of problem that we want to move away from, rather than some long-term aspiration that we want to get to. So if you want somebody to take action soon and create a sense of urgency, you've really got to delve into what those problems are, both on a logical as well as an emotional basis. And this is really key because people, we are all driven by making emotional decisions and then some looking at the logic behind those decisions. And I remember seeing a study reasonably recently where they did MRI studies on the amygdala, and they found that an emotional decision was made seconds before the frontal lobe neocortex actually caught up and made logical sense of this. So you've got to the key with all sorts of problems is you've got to be able to tap into the emotions that somebody's facing as well as the logical outcomes that they want. And when we talk problems and outcomes, we need to look at the value that is delivered in your client's eyes. Not what you think is delivered, but what your clients actually want. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. So once you've figured out what the problems are and what the outcomes are, you need to say, okay, who is the market? And the market comes back to the industries that you really deal with. Because a lot of businesses that we've worked with over the years have sort of said, oh, when I say who's your market, and they say, oh, well, look, everybody's my market, And I said, look, that's great, but the reality is you can't serve everybody, and everybody is never your market. The narrower that you can get with specific niches, and I don't say you need to just have one niche, but the narrower you can get with specific niches, which could mean vertical industries, the more success you are going to have, because the easier it is to understand them and have them understand you. So when it comes to your market, what we look for are the demographics, which are the industries, the size, the locations, even the roles of the people that you would be dealing with. And then we look at the psychographic. In the psychographic are the values and the beliefs. How do these people think? Are they open-minded? What are their beliefs around whatever it is that you do? Are they innovators? What are you looking for in the type of person that you want to deal with? And that's really key, because we all want to work with people that we know, like, and trust. And there's no fun working with somebody or an organization that has completely alien values to yours, because that's just going to cause a lot of stress. And down the bottom we have traffic and conversion. And so once you've figured out what the problems and outcomes are, and you figured out what your market is, you've got to have a way of getting in front of them. I mean, it's like saying, okay, I'm going to open a shop and have no one walk past us. Okay, so you've got to be able to get your message in front of the right people, and this is really key. If somebody is going to take notice of your message, whether they see an advertisement that you have or some content that you've put out, or you reach out to them actively, you have got to have something of relevance to them. And therefore, knowing your problems and the outcomes and being able to actually target these people very specifically is going to be absolutely key to building a business. But the final thing over here is conversion. And this is where I think the rubber actually hits the road, because nothing happens until a sale is made. And every day, just about every day, I would get any number of different emails or LinkedIn messages from people saying, oh, I can get you more leads, I can get you more traffic, I can get you more people coming to the door, starting conversations with you. And I say that's fantastic. The problem though is, unless you have your conversion rate really dialed in, you are going to be wasting a whole heap of money and time and effort getting traffic in the door because you're not actually converting them. And I have lots of conversations with lead generation companies. Some of them, I know 2 or 3 really good ones. And the comment that they make consistently is they say, look, we get good quality leads to the company that engaged us, only to find that the company never actually talks to the lead, never actually doesn't have a sales process involved that they can actually convert the lead into a profitable client. And then the company comes back to the lead generation company and says these leads are no good. But the problem is the leads are fine. The people were interested. They might even have wanted to buy, but there was no process and no system to actually convert them into clients. And therefore, once you have that system dialed in, you can know what the economics are to get a client in the door, which means that you can spend more money on actually getting more clients in the door. Because there's a very well-known marketer, Dan Kennedy, who always espouses the fact that the person who can outspend everybody else to buy a client is going to win. Because the more money you can spend getting a client, because you know that your conversion rate is really dialed in, the more money that you can actually spend to grow your business. So when we work with clients, one of the things that we always do is we always survey their clients. And the reason we do this is because of that Bain and Company quote down there, where they surveyed 300, 400 clients, and they found that 80% of the people that they spoke to believed that, I'll go back a second. 80% of people believe that they provide a superior service and give clients exactly what they want. But when Bain actually surveyed these clients, they actually found only 80% actually delivered to expectations. Now that's a huge difference. And honestly, we are all prone to making assumptions about the value we deliver. And sometimes it can be accurate, but as Bain has noticed, it's very often not accurate. And sometimes we just need a few degrees of shift to see, is the value that we think that we are providing actually aligned with the value that the client expects and wants. In certain cases, we found that it wasn't, and by correcting it, we help them actually save their business. And I'll give you a couple of examples of recent interviews that we've done. We found one of our clients is a very high-level engineering consultancy, and he works with other engineering consultancies who then work with property developers. And our client basically had a rather interesting situation with a business partner who had basically left, taking one of his big clients with him, and was now in the position that he really had to scramble for more work because one of his really large clients, a major part of his business, had just walked out the door. And so when we started working with him, we said, okay, let's talk to your existing consultancy clients to find out what do you do really well, and what are they looking for, and are there places that we could actually improve. And so I interviewed a large consultancy that was a client of his. And I said, okay, so, you do this, 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 and this. And I said, and they said, look, he does all of this, but one of the areas that we're not happy with was the fact that he charges our clients directly rather than going through us. Now I said, that's interesting. So if he white labeled the service and you directly and you charged your clients so that they didn't know that he even existed, would that make a difference? And they said, absolutely. And I said, okay, so how much work are you giving him at the moment? And they said, we're giving him about 10% of the available work. And I said, look, if we did this and we came to an agreement, what would the difference be? How much more work would you give him? They said, we'd give him probably about 85-90% of the work, because we still do some of it in-house, but we'd give him 85% of the work. I said, wow, okay. I rang the next one, put the same proposition to them. They said, something very similar. I rang the next one, something very similar. Now, these interviews, by the way, are in-depth interviews with senior partners of these firms. We're not talking junior people. And the interview could go for maybe half an hour, maybe an hour, depending on what it is. And so obviously I then ring up my client and say, well, you go and do this. And that single set of interviews ramped up his business considerably. Another client of ours, an MSP, he was getting a lot of leads. And here's another interesting case. He was getting a lot of leads. They were qualified. He knew they were qualified, but not one of them was converting into business. Not one lead out of 20 proposals converted into business. And so I said, okay, well, what's going on here? So in a couple of cases, I actually rang people where he'd put proposals out and found out what was really going on, where he was missing the mark entirely. In another couple of cases, I actually replayed sales conversations, which I'd asked him to record, and figured out what was going on. And then we rejigged his proposal structure as well as the way what he was actually selling, because we actually found that what he thought he was selling was not what the clients actually wanted to buy, which is really quite interesting. So he wanted a particular service that he was pushing, and the clients actually said, look, we don't actually care, because we have somebody else who does that particular part, and we want him to just specialize in this particular part. And just doing that, he ramped up the number of proposals that were actually being accepted to about 75-80%. Okay, just through those interviews. And the final one, all right, Cal. The final one is a client of ours who was an educational consultant. Unfortunately, he's passed away. And he dealt with large schools, private schools, to help them improve student learning outcomes. And I interviewed a number of principals of these very large schools at length and found that one of the areas that he was doing could have been hived off as a smaller subset of a much larger program. And when I interviewed some smaller schools, they said, look, the larger program is too large for us, and we'd really appreciate something smaller. And I said, okay, so if we take this small subset, can we get that in as a starting point? And that increased his sales considerably, because we could then actually promote a product to people that actually matched their criteria. So when we do customer interviews, we look at how we can increase the lifetime value and maintain a long-term relationship. And we understand exactly what the experience and the expertise is, and why your clients buy, and what it is that they're really looking for. And we also look and see if there's some sort of mismatch as to why somebody would buy, somebody would not buy. And with our clients, we give them a comprehensive insight into the customer's experience. And sometimes, as we've seen, we can also foster innovation. We can find new products or services that we can actually sell people. And so we do this also as a standalone service. We do this as part of our bigger programs, but you also do it as a standalone service. So if that is something that is of interest, by all means, give me a yell. So let's look at your market. If you think of your market as a big pie, So at any point, a small percentage of your market is ready to buy. They're looking for a solution. They know they have a problem and they are actively looking for a solution. Now, if you think about how you buy something, and it doesn't matter whether you're buying something relatively cheap or actually really quite expensive, the thing is you are going to do some research. If you know you want something, if you know you have a problem, you are going to do a significant amount of research. You're going to look at websites. You're going to look at reviews. You're going to look at recommendations. You may ask people that you trust for their recommendations. And that small segment, that say 3% of the market, is very crowded if you think about it, because you have to stand out to everybody else. And how do you actually go about doing that? And the other interesting thing is, especially if you sell high-level products or services, senior decision makers, just like us, are going to be 60, 70, 80% of the way down the buying funnel doing their research before they want to talk to a vendor. So it's really critical that we do everything in our power to build up our position in the market and develop that sense of trust, so that when people are looking, we're the people who come up. Then you have the 7 to 8%, and bear in mind that while these add up to 100%, these are obviously somewhat rubbery figures. You've got the next lot who are open to a conversation, and this is where prospecting comes in. So I may not be actively looking for something, but if I see something, I see an ad, or somebody rings me, or somebody sends me a message and says, hey, listen, I know that you're likely to have these particular priorities. I know that you're likely to be facing these sorts of challenges. Are you open to having a conversation? And I'd say, if that was the case, I'd give them a hearing and then start the ball rolling into having a sales conversation down the track, if that was what it was. And then there's the next 30% who we know we have an issue, but it's sort of in the back burner. We don't really care about it. But something could trigger our interest down the track. And then there are the people who are possibly simply not interested at this point. There are people who don't know why they're stuck, but they're not interested at this point. And this is where long-term nurture and marketing comes in. But in every one of these cases, you need to answer 3 questions. One is, why this? Why is this important? Why are we talking about it now? Why are we talking about it now? And why should we listen to you? So there are 3 questions. And those are the things we also cover out of the client interviews that we do. So when it comes to positioning ourselves, if you take a screenshot, there are a couple of different free reports that we give away that help position us as credible suppliers in our space. The one here, Attract High Value Clients, has been responsible for a lot of business over the years, because people would download this. It's about 50 pages. They would read it. They would call us. They would turn up and they printed it out. They had sticky notes all over it. They basically made the decision to become clients long before actually ever even speaking to us. That is the power of a free report, some sort of credibility device. We put out a lot of content. We put out videos. We put out a newsletter. It all adds to the mix of positioning us as credible go-to suppliers in our space. So when we look at the system that we use, there are 3 keys to the system that we use to generate business. And like tumblers in a safe, these three circles, marketing, prospecting, and sales, all have to align. So a big mistake that we see with a lot of companies is they only focus on marketing, and they don't do any active selling, and they hope that people will just come in and buy. And that's fine if you're an e-commerce company. where people are just going to, or you're going to Amazon and you select the product and you don't actually talk to anybody, and that's fine. You hit the button and you buy the thing and it gets delivered. Great. But if you are selling anything that is of high value, anything that needs a conversation, that you have to, people have to understand what it is you do, you have to understand them, there is going to be both a significant amount of selling involved as well as prospecting to get your name in front of them. And so while marketing basically positions you and helps attract people into your orbit and nurtures them along the way with the content that you might produce, prospecting is really key, because you need to reach out to people who might not be entirely in your market. Your marketing is targeting these people. It could also be targeting some of these people open to buying. But it's these other ones that know they have an issue or don't know why they're issued, that they're stuck. That's where prospecting really comes in, because by actively figuring out who is in your target market, who is ideal for you, and then actually actively reaching out to them will mean that you raise your profile, you raise your hand long before anybody else does, because the early bird actually does catch the worm. Come on. And with prospecting, oh, by the way, so prospecting, how many of you actually like picking up the phone? You can put it in the chat if you actually like picking up the phone, because I can tell you that most people don't like picking up the phone. But picking up the phone can be one of the most effective ways of actually bringing in business. So you can use a combination of picking up the phone, of marketing, of direct email, of direct messages, but picking up the phone is actually a key part of it. And then we come to sales, and selling is the core activity that brings in the business, because this is where you're actually exploring a prospect's issues. You're actually giving them insights. You're working out what it is that they really want, how you can solve their particular problem, and most of all, you are building up a level of trust with them. Well, as Nobby says, picking up the phone as a new advisor, absolutely. So, Avi, okay, I'm looking at this. Best method to match its selling, marketing, and prospecting. Sellers should manage selling. The marketing team should manage the marketing. I agree. But the marketing team needs to talk to the selling team and vice versa. Because very often we see marketing teams going off and doing whatever they want to do in their own little silos and coming up with stuff. And the salespeople say, but actually, no, these are the real problems that people want to solve. And therefore, you really need to have that confluence of those two people. Now, I'm a big advocate of salespeople actually doing a lot of their prospecting. Now, I know a lot of companies these days say, oh, look, we have a separate prospecting team and we have a separate account management team. But I think it's a lazy salesperson's way of not actually picking up the phone and getting their own leads. So when we look at sales conversations, so we've moved from prospecting, getting the lead, doing the qualification, and let me make one other point here. With qualification, it is really important to qualify out as fast as possible. One of the worst things in any sales environment, any sales situation is the maybe. I might do something. We want to know whether somebody is going to do something, and if they are going to do something, when they're going to do that something, or they're not going to do it. I'd rather a hard yes or a hard no rather than this maybe that just strings us all along. Because we tend to waste time, and I've seen this over the years, and we've all done this as salespeople. We think it's going to close, we think it's going to close, we think it's going to close, but it never closes. And it is simply a waste of everybody's time and energy. So when we work with clients, we actually have little systems where we say, okay, If something isn't happening, we very politely ask in a very subtle way, do you want to do something or not? So we just move on without, so that we know where we all stand. Because there's nothing worse than simply being ghosted by someone. So when we are actually in front of a prospect, we want to lead the conversation, and this is really, really critical. And we need to lead the conversation and have the prospects understand that we understand their issues, and understand that we understand both the emotional and logical impacts of not solving the issue, as well as solving the issue. And the framework that we use is the format system, which actually comes out of adult education theory. A woman called Bernice McCarthy back in the 1980s developed this, and she said that we all have preferences in the way that we process information. Now, that's not to say that any one of these quadrants is by itself. We all use all four of these quadrants, but where do we start when we want information? Now, somewhere around 20% of the population is interested in why. Why should I listen to you over anything else? And unless you can give that percentage of the population reasons why they should be listening, they will simply switch off. But what happens with salespeople, especially technical salespeople, is they go into the what. So they go into the what over here, and they start to literally vomit all over their prospect with the technical details of what it is that they're talking about. And eyes glaze over because we haven't given people the context of the why. I should do it that way so we can actually see it. And that is a huge mistake that technical people make. And the other mistake that technical people make is they go into how is it delivered. So people, and this is the big trap. So you're sitting in front of a prospect and the prospect says, tell me more, and leans forward. And you make the mistake of going, I got him. And you lean forward and you tell him. And the prospect then leans back, smiles, and trust me, you've lost it. So the key is always, 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 until you have delved in to the problems. Oops, what happened there? Come back. Until you've delved into the problems and the outcomes and really, really, really honed into those, do not ever go into the what and the how. How do I get this thing back? So when we teach salespeople how to sell, we talk about staying above the line. So you basically want to stay above the line here. And you want to stay in the why and the what. Just talk about the pain and talk about the gain. Those are the only two things you want to talk about. Only once you have a level of commitment that they understand the problem, that they want to do something about the problem, and you know when they are going to do something about the problem, do you talk about what the actual solution could entail. Because unless you have a level of commitment and the client understands the implications of doing something or not doing something, why staying with the status quo isn't something that they want, why they need to actually move, there is absolutely no reason for going into the what over here. Oops. So when you're dealing with any sales situation, it's really important to change your thinking from selling to collaboration. You are actually working with your specific client prospect to figure out what is it that they really need to do and how is it that they really need to do it. And you're looking for one of four different motivation types, okay? Because we're all motivated by logical as well as emotional reasons for doing something. And the logical reasons tend to be money. I want to make money or I want to save money. I want to save some time. The emotional reasons tend to be satisfaction, risk, avoiding risk, status, recognition. So a lot of deals fall over because of a status recognition issue and a risk issue. The risk being what will happen if this thing doesn't work. And that tends to drive more people than getting the result and what the positive outcome could be. And what is my status going to be if this thing doesn't work? Or what is my status going to be if this thing does work? And the final emotional reason is around well-being. Is this going to make me happier? Is it going to give me a better quality of life? Is it going to detract from my quality of life? We've seen lots of instances where deals would have been really, really good for the organization, but for the person concerned making the decision, or even the users who would be involved in using the thing, it was a case of, this is going to make my life harder. I don't actually want to change. I'm happy doing what I'm doing. Or this could take my job away. Or this, I'm supposed to be doing this. Now you're going to put in a system for me, that's going to do this. What's going to happen to me? And those are the reasons things very often get kiboshed. And you need to understand what is in the personal motivation of the people involved in the decision, because that is actually key. So while we always say you need to have a business case for the senior people in the organization, which generally talks about money and time and productivity and efficiency, you cannot neglect the fact that other people in the organization are going to be looking at the emotional drivers of what this thing could mean for them. And so with every conversation, we're looking for one of three outcomes. We're looking for another contact, possibly, especially if it's a larger organization where you've got multiple stakeholders involved, multiple people involved in the decision. And in most cases, that is going to be the case. You need to have a contact and say to somebody, okay, who else could be involved in this decision? Who else do I need to talk to? Who else would get really upset if they weren't involved? You want never leave a meeting without another meeting booked. So what is the next date that we're going to meet? When are we going to do? What is the agenda? Or what we would call cash, which is effectively, can I give you a proposal? What's the next step to do that? And with any of these things, you need to understand what are the objections that could come up. And you need to understand what common objections come up and have a method of pre-framing those objections. And Barbara's saying, have a drink. So, one of the things that we do with our clients is we actually talk about we have a program which is called a revenue growth intensive, and we frame and lead sales conversations using visual models. We deal with multiple stakeholders, how to handle objections and negotiate, how to do demonstrations and trials. Believe me, there's a real art to doing demonstrations and trials. And how to deliver effective proposals, as we saw with the MSP that I spoke about earlier. Not having an effective proposal structure, not knowing what should be in the proposal, and the fact that you should have already agreed to everything that needs to be in there long before the proposal goes out, can mean that you just get ghosted at the end. And then how do you actually handle pricing and negotiation? Now, having said all of that, if we come back to here, and we look at this percentage of the population that are open to a conversation, they know they have an issue, you've reached out to them in some form, possibly you've done some prospecting, they've maybe downloaded some of your material like this, or you have had a conversation and they say, look, I'm not quite ready to buy something. The key is that you have to nurture them going forward. Now, this is an old chart from Microsoft, but it's still very accurate. In fact, the only thing that's probably changed is if we look at the last thing over here, which says 12 contacts, it's probably gone to 22 contacts. That's what's happening now. So if we look at the fact that it takes multiple touches for somebody to make a decision to be ready to buy, it is incumbent on you as the salesperson and the marketing team to make sure that you are constantly in their faces in some unobtrusive way, so that when they make a decision to buy something, they will actually pick you because you have positioned yourself correctly. And always remember, people buy when they're ready to buy, not when we need to make the sale. So years ago, I read a fantastic book by Wendy Evans, how to get as much business as you want in 90 days and keep it for a lifetime. And Wendy Evans used to work for Saki & Saki, the advertising company, Thomas Cook Travel, Intercontinental Hotels, and she realized there was something called the 90-day rule. And the 90-day rule is quite simple. A customer, even a long-term customer, will forget that you exist and can provide a particular service if they have not heard from you within 90 days. If on day 91 somebody comes along and offers something that you could have done, but you hadn't talked to them in 90 days, they will go with the other person. And she proved it time and time again. And we've seen instances of this over the years. And it always plays out. And I think one interesting instance was a client of ours. We had done some interviews with a government department of theirs, and this client had worked with this government department over 3 or 4 years on particular projects. And what was really interesting was the last project, there'd been a sort of niggle with the IT director of this department. And so our client had, for the last 3 years, not contacted them, thinking that there was a problem, that there was a bit of bad blood. I rang the IT director, and the story was actually quite different. There was no mention of this whatsoever. And he said, we've just put out a tender, and these people aren't on it. And I'd completely forgotten about them. And I said, when's the tender due? 3 days? I said, can they put in a bid? And they said, absolutely. I immediately rang our client, and this is once again the power of the interview. Client said, we'll put in a bid. They did. They won the deal. Now, what's really interesting also is when I spoke to the IT director, he said these people had done such a good job over the years that he would have spent his own money because of the lack of stress that came from having them do the work rather than him do the work. So the key is to be in front of people consistently. We've had clients who have turned up after, I had somebody turn up after a year, one of our first clients, where we took them from 3 million to 11 million, $1.5 million in revenue in a couple of years, because I had put them on a newsletter list. A whole year went by. I never heard from them. One day they rang me up and said, we are still talking about one of the sales newsletters that you put out a year ago. Can you help us? We worked with them for a couple of years and massively increased their revenue. Another client of ours rang me up before Christmas, and he said, Rashid, I have to apologize. And I said, what do you need to apologize for? And he said, I've been deleting your emails for 2 years. I saw this particular one. Can you help? We helped them become the second most profitable subsidiary. It's a multinational behind Germany. So, in summary, you have a choice. This is where you are at the moment, and you can have the choice that you're going to grow, or you're going to do nothing and you will decline. And it's always a choice. But the thing is, it does this. It's not a linear curve. Right now, there's very little gap between the growth and decline. But as you move further and further down, the gap gets bigger, and the more work you need to do to actually keep a level of growth, or suddenly find that the decline is quite massive. So it's always a choice. And given that, that's a bit hard to read. Given that we have a number of different ways that you can work with us. Now, the first thing I would always suggest is just have a call. Talk to me. It's free. We can talk about what your issues are, where you need to go, and put in a plan to getting there. We can run the client interviews as a standalone process where we'll decide how many clients that we need to interview for you, and you will get a very comprehensive report as to what it is that they've said. We will look for ways to increase your value, ways to help you innovate, and basically know that you're on the right track. We also have a revenue growth intensive where we work with business leaders to move them from the day-to-day chaos that they're facing all the way to having a business that actually works for them, not them for the business. And obviously we also offer sales training and coaching. Some of you have been on our sales training and coaching. Sorry. And so that's it for today. I trust that you got value. If you, by all means, just unmute yourself and tell me something that you took away. That would be really great. And if the work resonates, that I do resonates with you, come and speak with me. And obviously we can take it from there. So thank you very much.
Rashid, Avi has a question about the 90-day rules. It's in the chat. Mm-hmm. You may just want to quickly read it. Does the 90 rule also apply to nurturing a sale? How long should we wait for the customer to make a decision before we identify that the lead is no longer a lead?
No, that okay. That's
a very good question, though.
That is a very good question. So I think you need to look at urgency. If the customer is not making a decision, why is the customer not making a decision? What is holding the customer back from making a decision? Because if something is urgent enough, we will do something about it, one way or the other. If it's not urgent, then we won't. So that comes back to, it simply comes back to the, where is it? It comes back to here. Okay, so if the why was not big enough and the outcome wasn't big enough, if the why wasn't big enough and the outcome isn't big enough, they won't make a decision. If there are competing priorities, they won't make a decision. So generally speaking, we'll work with maybe 2 or 3 top priorities. Okay, if this thing isn't in one of those top 2 positions, they are not going to make a decision. So your key is to figure out, is this thing a priority or not? 90 days, I would put them on a nurture system. I wouldn't keep hammering them, because they'll buy when they're ready to buy. But what our job is to show them what the implications of not taking action are and what the implications of taking action are. Does that help?
Yep, that was great. Thanks.
I may want to. Can I add something to that?
Sure.
I think in the because we're in the prospecting area of the system, Avi, and what I think is, if you look at that, as we call it, the format, the way, the what, the how, and the what if, work through that with the prospect as well, right? Find out in particular what they're struggling with. So they concentrate on the what. Try to get to know what their problems are, but also try to find out as much as possible is there anyone else involved in the decision making, because otherwise you're going to waste your time forever. So understand their situation.
Got it. So I had one last question. Just based on your experience, what's the best method of prospecting? What's the most effective? Actually, let me rephrase the question. What's the most efficient method of prospecting?
Okay. Depends who you're prospecting to. Okay, as always.
Yep.
I've seen a number of. Okay, so I deal with a lot of outbound agencies. There are a couple of that I could name that are very, very good. Every one of them says pick up the phone. Especially with senior people, you are more likely to get a hearing if you pick up the phone. Because we all get copious numbers of emails, and email just gets buried. If we look at LinkedIn, we think we send a LinkedIn message, but the reality is that the vast majority of people only go into LinkedIn once a week. It's really the people who go into LinkedIn all the time, believe it or not, the salespeople, the marketers, and the recruiters. Everybody else is not necessarily on LinkedIn all the time. So I have sent direct messages, I have sent emails, but it's only when I pick up the phone to somebody that all of a sudden something happens. It's as if they've never sent the email, they've never seen the emails. It's as if they've never read the direct messages. And you can send a letter. Look, Barbara, just talk about that while I take a drink.
Okay, yeah. Go back to the old ways, because that's one of the best ways to stand out. Okay, send a letter, send a little, as we call it, lumpy mail. It's not going to cost you a lot, but it will certainly make you stand up, because so few people do it these days. It's not funny.
Look, I was working with a lead generation company recently, and they were sending a coffee mug and a couple of Tim Tams out in the mail, and they would track it. And so, they'd ring up the prospect and say, "Did you get the Tim Tams?" and start a conversation. Did it always work? No. But you got a call. You managed to get hold of somebody. They would start a conversation, say 80% of the time.
Just to add to that, I mean, you talk about lumpy mail, and it used to work for us in insurance. We'd send out 2 Aspros and say, finances are causing you a headache. Take these tonight and I'll call you in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Or in the old days, take a Bex, have a lie down, and I'll call you.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Anyway, okay, look, we're just past the hour, so thank you very much, everybody. If you've got any other questions, by all means, just hit me up, and I'm more than happy to have a chat.
Time for cake.
Time for cake, indeed. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Good to see you. Bye.